I'm here with Grant, VP of Esports for the Washington Justice. In the preseason, a lot of signings happened. For you guys, 3 happened. Some players you said goodbye to. So it's an interesting time to be talking about these topics, how to think about Overwatch in the coming season, especially with Overwatch 2 and everything like this. So I guess a good starting point always is to talk about the learnings of last season. What do you think? What are the lessons that stand out to you that you took from season 4?
Yeah, I mean, first off, thanks so much for having me. Obviously, really excited to have a chance to talk to everyone, today about Overwatch League and how we're thinking about the upcoming 2022 season and whatnot. For us, the 2021 season was remarkable in a lot of ways, right? For us, we made playoffs. We got to go to Hawaii. I think that was an incredible experience for the team and for us as an organization. I think it really proved kind of a thesis around we can build a team that meets our objectives, right? So I think I've talked a little bit in the past about how we were approaching the 2021 season, and for me and I think for Aaron as well, our general manager we wanted to build a roster that would make playoffs with the spend that we kind of had in mind, but not necessarily overspending to necessarily guarantee a championship or try to guarantee a championship, right? I think once as long as you qualify for playoffs, anything can happen, right? The meta can go your way. Players can be very, players can exceed expectations. They can underperform. The meta cannot go your way, right? Like all sorts of things can happen. But once you make playoffs, you're giving yourself a chance. You're giving yourself a shot at winning it all, and obviously competing for a championship. And so obviously for us in Hawaii, things did not go our way, right? Dallas and Atlanta were 2 incredibly strong teams, and while we qualified for playoffs, we didn't make it further through that bracket. But for us, I think it was a real testament to Aaron and Supreme and the team in terms of building a roster with the expectation that we had all kind of aligned on in terms of finishing 8th, and we did exactly that, right? And so I think anytime you can kind of exactly meet your expectation, we were pretty excited as an organization, and looking forward to building on that for 2022.
Right. And I recall talking to Pri in the preseason, and he said basically like your roster building strategy or your way of attracting these top talents like Mag, for instance, or the season beforehand, Decay, was basically not to throw the biggest bag at them, but to build an atmosphere as well as like the full package in order to attract these guys. Now, in this off-season alone, we heard about situations like Prophet, for instance, convinced Smurf to join that team, or Pelican teamed up with Piggy because they're friends. Is there something like this also going on where, for instance, maybe a player like Decay has a certain attraction? Or what, generally speaking, are like the attractive points for players to join your org or also keep resigning with your org? Because, I assume players like Happy and Vigilante were probably pretty contested, right, in the market.
Yeah, this certainly has been a wild offseason. I think a lot of teams kind of, circled around a certain set of players, right? And it was fairly competitive for a lot of players, including the ones that we signed. I think for us, like Aaron's mentioned in the past, I don't think we feel bad saying like we do not overspend for our players, right? We're not going out throwing just the largest check set at people. I don't think that's a fiscally responsible way to run an organization or to build a team. So for us, there's a couple of different buckets if you look at it, right? And so I think work-life balance in terms of the setup that we have in Washington is pretty, I think, top tier in esports, right? The players can literally get to the practice facility without having to walk outside if they so choose, right? They basically get off a plane, from South Korea, get shuttled to their apartment. It's fully furnished. They put their stuff down and they can walk to the practice facility in 2 minutes and 30 seconds, right? And start practicing and playing, right? So, we've done a lot of work in terms of getting that set up and making it very simple for these players that all they have to do, all they have to worry about is ultimately playing the game. And then, if that's kind of bucket one, bucket two is kind of the support staff that we've built around them, right? I think Henny, Aaron, Supreme, our coaches, historically have done a great job at, kind of molding these players, and we really do, kind of make it clear to them that, like, we want them to develop as people, right? We want them to turn into great players. We want them to find success competitively, but we also want them to develop into real all-stars and really great people and ambassadors for the game and esports as a whole, right? And so, Supreme has done a wonderful job doing that. I think Henny and our social team do a great job. We put out a lot of content. All of our majority of our posts come out in English and Korean, right? So, like, we really do, I think, build kind of this holistic package of, if you're coming to Washington, you're gonna have a great, 7 months of the season, or whatever it is in terms of your work-life balance. Hopefully we'll find competitive success. You obviously can't guarantee that. And then, we will also, kind of take care of molding you into, kind of being a great person and somebody who, can have a long career in esports or the Overwatch League.
Right. Now, coming into this off season, it feels like it's the moment of peak volatility. I mean, we have a game that we're building a team for, that we have a new game, and we're building a team for it, even though we haven't even seen really what this game will look like. We're subtracting one player from the equation. At the same time, we also have to take into consideration budgeting sizes in terms of, like, there is an expected increase of viewership, of course, with Overwatch 2 and with the increased player base and whatnot. But that doesn't seem to be a certainty. So from a budgeting point of view, and also from a competitive point of view, how does one set up a system or a structure to go into this offseason?
Not easily, I think, is the answer that you'll get from a lot of teams, this offseason, and staff working, on those teams. I think, I've been in esports almost 7 years now, and I've never been asked to, build or run an organization, build a team for a game that we've never played, never seen, never had a beta for. What I think our players played it for, 8 hours in Hawaii, and they kicked us out of the room, right? Aaron and I and our team staff, we didn't get to see it, and obviously there's VODs and whatnot, but it's really challenging, right? And I think, when you think about, when, there's certain moments in sports and esports when it makes sense to invest, right? You are on the cusp of a championship. You're on you just came off coming third, and you have some long-term contracts, and you just need that one next piece to push you over the top, right? Or there's some fundamental change to the ecosystem where, all of a sudden winning a championship, the prize pool, quadrupled from 5 million to 20 million or something, right? There are moments where investing makes sense. I think for us and for a lot of teams, looking at Overwatch 2, like, it's a question mark, I think, in terms of, is this the moment, right? And I think for us, we're kind of leaning to, let's wait and see, right? I think Albert talked a lot about how great it would be if we could all sign players in February, right? After, theoretically a beta's out or whatnot, and we've actually seen how players adapt to the game, how they behave on it. And so I think, and a lot of the work that Aaron and Supreme have done is, we're finding young rookie, up and coming talent, right? And we're going to sign them to, friendly contracts and long-term contracts for the Justice, right? And we're going to bring them to DC, give them a great experience, bring them together as a team, and then we're going to see what happens, right? And I think, if Overwatch 2 comes out and it's an incredible game, like, you'll see teams all of a sudden spend, right? I think, it's kind of this weird thing where fans, kind of get, and the community gets into a little bit of a mindset where the roster that you start the season with is locked in to some degree, right? And I think, COVID has certainly made mid-season acquisitions more challenging, right? And visa timelines and whatnot have made it more challenging, but it doesn't mean they'll be impossible, and it doesn't mean that they'll still be as challenging for 2022, right? So I think there's a real world where you see a lot of these teams kind of save a little bit of their war chest, see how the launch of the game goes. We're going to kind of, I think, also lean toward that direction. and see how things are, right? If viewership, like you mentioned, is triple what it is now, there might be a real ROI on spending and investing in having a championship level team for Overwatch 2. But I think it's really important to kind of set that expectation now, right? I think this past season, we saw the power rankings for the Justice, and I think Plat Chat and casters and talent had us second, third, fourth, but incredibly high ranked, and really, a lot of that comes down to how little information there is out there around salaries and contracts and why players are coming to play for certain organizations. If you had asked any of us internally at the Justice, did we think we were a second place team this past season? Like, we would have told you no. We would have told you exactly our goal is to be on the cusp of playoff team, right? Somewhere in that 10th to 8th position, and obviously we were excited that we finished exactly 8th, and I know the community reaction was a little different, right? They were like, wow, like, you guys underperformed, you didn't come second, you weren't in the championship. And it's this weird thing where I'm not exactly sure how to fix that information gap, right? I hope having a chat with you is a good start, right? I think Aaron does a lot of his educational streams on his power hours and whatnot, but it is a really hard thing where unless you're kind of this inside baseball, you do have folks who sometimes just have wildly different expectations from what teams are thinking, and I've said it often, like, try to put yourselves in the shoes of a team, right? Like, how are you thinking about, possibly spending, $1.5 million, 2 million, 2.5 million to build a roster to compete on a game you've never played, for viewership that you don't know what it's going to be, for a season that you don't know exactly when it starts, how long it goes, if there's live events, if you can monetize it, right? Like, it's a really big ask. Like, if that 2.5 million or 2 million is your cash, like, that's hard, right? And I think we can obviously dive into some more on the ROI and the business perspective of investing, but I think it is just something for folks to think about. Just try to put yourselves in the shoes of some of these teams and how we're thinking about the season and the expectations that we kind of have going into it. That was a lot. I'm sorry.
No worries. There's actually a lot of strings that I want to pick up. I think, like, chronologically, I think we can talk about the expectations, or where the disconnect was for the community and also for the experts to a degree. So I think I guess what we should clarify on is, do you mean your expectations given your spending and also being sort of like in the middle of everything was there, like in 8th place, sort of around there? Or do you mean you already saw in preseason scrims, for instance, that you were going to land somewhere there? Where did your personal expectations in the preseason come from, that you said, okay, we want to make 8th, and if we do that, we're satisfied?
Yeah, so the process for us starts, even much earlier than preseason, even before we sign a player, right? The ask to our competitive staff is to evaluate all the other teams in the league, right? We make educated assumptions about what they're spending on players. We obviously try to get information about how much players are being paid, what their contracts are, and whatnot. And essentially, we build kind of a tier list, right, of how much teams are spending relative to their competitive success, either in the past season or where we expect their competitive success to be in the coming season. Going into the 2021 season, we did a very similar exercise, and we were like, okay, if we spend X, based on all the other information that we have out there, we expect to land here, right? And Aaron, does a remarkable job, kind of presenting a variety of options, right, to myself and then to our board as well, right? It's an exercise of, okay, we think if we spend A, we land 1st to 4th. If we spend B, we land 8th, 4th to 8th. If we spend C, we land 8th to 12th, right? And collectively, we then kind of evaluate, like, is that amount of money and that overall spend, something that we can monetize against through sponsorship, through live events, through the increased presence on social media or whatnot. Is there a return on that spend, and also to a certain degree to prize pool and making playoffs and kind of all of the excitement that goes along with that, right? And so if collectively the decision is, okay, like, we want to spend bucket C and land in, or I forget which bucket I was on, but bucket C and land in that, 8th to 10th spot because we think, we can monetize it with a new sponsor. We think the overall fandom that it brings to the team is worthwhile. Go out and build that roster, right? And then obviously Aaron and Supreme do try their hardest to attract those players, construct the roster in a certain way. And then, to your point, things obviously change over time, right? As more players are getting signed, we adjust our models, right? In terms of, okay, like if all of a sudden, I'm trying not to throw anyone under the bus, but let's say for instance, last year, like all of a sudden Valiant's spending money, you're like, okay, like maybe the model shifts in terms of, if you spend X, you actually need to spend a little bit more to kind of find yourself in that 8th to 10th position, right? So, and then, also to your point, like then preseason starts, right? So we look at the scrims, how are scrims going? Do we need, we're hopefully, Aaron and Supreme we're on point with, how they were evaluating talent and the model, right? In terms of, we've built this roster now. Are they kind of landing competitively in scrims where we expect them to? And if not, like, do we need to adjust further, right? And kind of evaluate things from there. But that's kind of a little bit about how the process goes. So I think to your point, like very early on, we were like, this is where we think we'll end up based on what we're spending and based on the players we constructed. I think it was kind of reassured or solidified a little bit in terms of the preseason. Aaron would probably know a little bit better than I do about that. And then, at the end of the season, like we did, we ended up exactly where we kind of expected.
Right. Now, for people on the outside,
and I think it's tough, right? Because, to your point, like, where is the information gap? I think it's that first part, right? Like, because I think you guys do get a lot of scrim bucks. Oh, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Like, a lot of scrim bucks, a lot of like, oh, like this roster stacked because of the players who are on it. But like, it's the first part, I think, where there's not a lot of context for folks about, hey, like here's actually like the overall spend for a lot of these, top tier teams. And it's like, yeah, if you look at that, you're like, wow, like, Justice probably aren't a second place team.
The thing is, what I understood, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the information that even Overwatch League teams got in terms of spending, and there are these scorecards or something that people have publicly elaborated upon, never really encompassed more than beyond the salaries or the buyouts that are invested, and would, for instance, forego something like the spending spent on a practice facility or on the housing or like these bonuses. So is that correct? Do you guys have actual hard figures on this? And taking that into account, because we talked about in the preseason that your facility was actually quite good. Is the Justice still a middling team with these in mind?
Yeah. So, when we look at when we talk about competitive spend, right? Like it's, at least for us, like it's the salary of our players, but it's their all-in cost, right? And
right.
So the all-in cost for a player for us is, their housing benefit, their food benefit, their payroll taxes, Medicare, Medicaid, like the whole all-in number, right? And I think that's, look, I'm not expecting GMs and the folks building teams to necessarily like focus on that as they're going about and I'm certainly not expecting fans and the community to focus on that, right? Like it's a lot of numbers, a lot of spreadsheets. It's honestly not a super fun thing to think about in general. But when you're running a business, like that is the cash that you're laying out to build your roster, right? Whether or not you like it, you have to kind of pay those commitments to the government and whatnot. So when we talk about like ranking spend, we generally compare that kind of all-in number, and it doesn't include the facility, I think, which you mentioned, but that kind of all-in number for players, that kind of all-in number for Aaron, our coaches, and our player manager Henny, right? Like that is our competitive spend bucket, if you will, right? And so it's that number that then gets compared against competitive spend buckets of other teams, right? And look, it's not a perfect science, right? I think and nor should it be, right? This is a competitive business. It's a league, right? Like that information is where GMs, kind of live, and they make their, that's what they base their careers off of, right? Being able to evaluate, other teams' spends and get it right. So, we kind of take that bucket, compare it against, other teams, and figure out, where we kind of sit in that chart, right, or that tier list. And look, sure, are there teams? I think Albert was mentioning, some teams have one bucket for buyouts and salary, right? Some teams don't, right? Like maybe they include housing, maybe their food stipends high, right? Like, sure, all of those things are valid variables that kind of go into that matrix. But for us, like it's the best assumptions that we can make about where we sit, kind of on that chart of spend, if you will, and where we think that translates, competitively on the field.